My name is Daniel Reed, and this happened just a few months ago. I worked the overnight shift at a distribution warehouse in Kansas City. Because of my hours, I've gotten used to being awake from early evening until late morning, even on my days off. It keeps me on a consistent schedule, but it also means I live opposite of the world around me. One night, after finishing work around 4 a.m., I drove home along quiet, empty roads. When I pulled into my neighborhood, everything was still, except for one thing. A car was parked right next to my driveway. It was an old black sedan with windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Its lights were off and it just sat there like it was waiting. I parked in my garage, glancing one last time down the driveway before heading inside. Normally, in my neighborhood, people parked near the houses they were visiting, and there was plenty of space along the street. So why park right next to my place? Still, I convinced myself someone was probably visiting a neighbor and didn't think much more of it. By the time I checked again, an hour later, the car was gone. The following night after work, I came home again, and my stomach dropped. The same black sedan was sitting in the exact same spot. This time, I walked down my driveway to take a closer look. As I got about 10 feet away, I thought I saw movement inside the car, just a faint shift behind the glass. Maybe it was my imagination, or a reflection. I didn't want to risk finding out. Instead, I took a picture of the license plate before heading inside. When I checked an hour later, the car was gone again. The third night, I had the night off. I decided to go for a long walk around the neighborhood just to clear my head. The car wasn't there when I left, but when I returned, an hour later, it was parked in the same exact spot, right outside my house. This time, I forced myself to walk right up to the window. Shielding the reflection with my hand, I peered inside. The car was completely empty. I tried to shake it off and went back inside, but when I grabbed my phone, I noticed a new notification. One of my security cameras had detected motion. My system covered my porch and the inside of the main rooms. I opened the app, and the saved clip began playing. For nearly the whole minute, the footage showed nothing. Then, in the last 5 seconds, something, or rather, someone, moved across the bottom of the frame. Only part of their head and shoulders were caught, but it was enough to make my heart stop. The camera that recorded the clip was in the same bedroom I was standing in. Suddenly, the silence of the house was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I turned slowly, scanning the shadows. Whoever was in my house could have been watching me already. I bolted toward the door. The second I stepped into the hallway, I heard movement in the bedroom behind me. Footsteps thundered down the hall, chasing me as I sprinted toward the front door. I didn't look back. I just ran into the woods and dialed 911. When the police arrived, the black car was gone. But I had the license plate photo. Within a few hours, they tracked the owner down. He was a man in his mid-20s, completely unhinged. On his phone, police found dozens of photos of my house, many taken at night. Some were of me sitting inside my living room, unaware he was outside. He'd also kept notes on my schedule, when I left for work, when I came home, when I slept. Even scarier, investigators couldn't figure out how he got into my house without being caught by the cameras. The footage they did find might not have even been the first time he'd broken in. I still live in that house, but to this day I don't know how long he had been inside with me, or what his real plan was. Back in 2019, I was driving for Uber in Portland, Oregon. On stormy nights, it was always slow. Most people stayed home, but I stayed out, hoping for the few rides that did pop up. One night, rain poured endlessly. Streets were empty. I waited in a deserted parking lot, scrolling through my phone, when finally a notification buzzed. A passenger requested a pickup, 25 minutes away, out in a remote area. The drop-off was another 20 minutes beyond that. Normally, I would have passed on it, but the storm made me desperate for work. I accepted. The drive was long and eerie, the rain hammering my windshield as I wound through back roads surrounded by fields and woods. The pickup point was nothing more than an intersection in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no buildings, just trees. I sat there, waiting. Nobody in sight. I started typing a message on the app when suddenly the back door opened. A man climbed in, soaking wet from the rain. He didn't say hello, just looked at me with a strange, unsettled expression. "You order the Uber?" I asked. He responded by saying my first name. His voice was flat, almost emotionless. As I drove, I couldn't shake the unease. He sat directly in the middle seat, so every time I glanced in the mirror, his eyes were right there, staring back at me. Something about him was off. I tried to break the silence. "So what brings you out here in this weather?" He didn't answer, just looked away. His silence felt heavier than words. Soon he started shifting in his seat, glancing around, fidgeting. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Drop me off here." We were still in the middle of nowhere. I asked if he was sure, but he cut me off sharply, repeating, "Drop me off here." I pulled to the side. As he reached for the door, I noticed his eyes drift to my phone, which sat in the console with the Uber app open. He froze, hesitating. Slowly, he pulled out his own phone and looked at it. I realized in that moment what was going through his head. The app had his full name, his account, his information. Whatever he might have been planning, he knew it could all be traced back to him. Trying to keep my voice steady, I said, "Don't worry, I'll cancel the ride from my end." "It won't charge you." He glared at me, his eyes burning with anger. But after a tense moment, he stepped out into the storm and vanished into the darkness. I drove away as fast as I could. Days later, police contacted me. Someone had gone missing that same night, last seen near the woods by that intersection. They wanted to know everything about my encounter. But with the storm washing away evidence, they never found the missing person, or the man I picked up. The fact that I was the last known person to see him alive still makes my stomach turn. I don't know what his real intentions were, but I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly avoided becoming another missing person myself. This story takes place in Ashland, Virginia, where I grew up. At the time, I was working a job that kept me outdoors half the day, and with April rains, every shift left me completely drained. One evening, after a long day, I drove home through the mud-soaked country roads. My driveway was a mess of wet tracks, but that night I noticed a second set of tire marks leading straight up to my house. I figured it was just a delivery driver turning around, but when I checked the porch, no mail, no package. It felt strange, but I brushed it off. Later that evening, while watching TV, I thought I heard a faint knock at the front door. When I checked, rain whipped into my face, but nobody was there. I shut the door and went back to the couch. An hour later, as I got up to use the bathroom, I noticed a muddy mark on the floor behind the couch. I never wore shoes inside, especially not wet ones. My chest tightened. Still, I wiped it up and tried to convince myself it was nothing. But the uneasy feeling never left. Eventually, I retreated upstairs, hoping I'd feel safer in my bedroom. 20 minutes later, I heard a dull thump in the hallway outside. Heart racing, I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. I finally opened it and peeked into the hall. Nothing. But then downstairs, my living room TV blared to life at full volume, playing the same show I'd been watching earlier. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and searched the whole downstairs. Nothing. But something wasn't right. When I went upstairs to check the spare room, a space I rarely used, I froze. On the floor near the closet was the TV remote, the same one that belonged to the living room set downstairs. My blood ran cold. Someone else had been in the house, controlling the TV, luring me away. I ran outside and called the police. When they searched the house, they found signs of forced entry, a broken lock on a window, more muddy prints, and evidence someone had been inside for hours. Whoever it was had slipped out during the chaos, leaving behind more questions than answers. They didn't steal anything, and I never found out what they wanted. But I know one thing for certain. While I was sitting in my living room that night, they were there too, lurking in the shadows.